Coming up, we continue our NBA draft outlook for the Brooklyn Nets next season by breaking down one athletic Ace Bailey out of Rutgers and a young, just to basketball phenom potentially in Khaman Maluach. We dive into it all coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Marmick. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And Doug, the nice thing about being a team that may spike the number one pick or the number two or the number three or the number four, number five is there is a ton of talent as we get into Ace Bailey out of Rutgers, who is about as naturally athletic as any prospect that you're going to look at going into next year's draft class.
Yeah, baby, in our backyard. Gonna get this. Maybe
That's
see
right.
Ace Bailey. Gonna get to hopefully see Ace Bailey live, play live this season. As you know, we're both centered in New Jersey. Go Rutgers! And so, the fact that Ace Bailey's going to Rutgers to play alongside Dylan Harper was really, really a surprise. And when you look at Ace Bailey, and just another testament, we talked about Cooper Flagg yesterday, but another testament to why tanking for this year specifically was such the important thing to do, and why moving off Mikal Bridges for all the picks and getting those Houston picks back, which is going to be a theme for this whole season, was the correct move. Is because even if you missed out on Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey is like right there in terms of generational talent, and would be easily, except for Wembanyama and Flagg, would be easily the number one pick in other drafts. Like, and with some people, even, I mean, Rafael Barlow, Locked On NBA Big Board, said that Ace Bailey has the best chance of anyone of actually maybe even surpassing Cooper Flagg up the list and actually landing at number one. Doesn't think it's likely, but just even that you would even mention it, right? That you would even throw it out there into the ether that it was a possibility is a testament to Ace Bailey. And when you watch him play, it's very, very easy to see why. And so I'm not even going to say consolation prize, because it's not. Like, the Nets are in such a good spot going into this season with the draft picks and their, ideas on and sights on tanking. Yeah, Cooper Flagg is the guy right now. If you landed at number two, you'd still, the Ace Bailey jerseys would be flying off the shelves in no time. Like that. This guy has absolutely got the goods.
No, and it's a good reminder off the top, as we said this before about how deep the draft class is going to be, but they're unlike other years. There are just these worlds where you mentioned, Wembanyama. Well, if it's not him, okay, then you start to reevaluate everything else. It's rare that you can look at the number two prospect and still be getting the same type of vibes in terms of what this player can be at the NBA level. 6'9", 200 pounds coming in. I mean, when you watch him, when you watch the highlights of him, I said this before we were starting, everyone's an athlete at the NBA. We get that. All these guys are the highest level of athletes. But he looks like he at times glides through plays and glides through the lane and makes these moves towards the basket and plays with a level above the rim, getting downhill. Like, all these little elements just seem to be fluid already at this point, knowing that he has the frame, put some size on, etc. We'll talk about where his game can expand. But that natural starting point is pretty damn exciting to watch when you see these highlights coming in.
Yeah, it's this new generation of like wing creators where you're huge, but you've been, you grew up watching guys like KD, right? And you're like, hey, just because I'm big doesn't mean I need to play in the post, which no one does anymore, by the way, anyway. But like these guys that all came up with longer frames that now know they're like, I'm going to play. I can play just like a stretch big. I can be an on-ball wing creator, which Ace definitely wants to be able to do. I can use my frame to my advantage when it comes to like shots at all three levels rather than just, be near the basket. I think he has a frame that clearly looks like it's going to fill out over time, right? Like you can easily see him putting on mass, not like it to a crazy amount, but like he's pretty skinny right now. If you look at him, but it doesn't look like a frame where it's going to be like skinny forever. Maybe like a guy we're going to talk about shortly. But the in terms of just sort of like where you could project like the NBA body to get, I mean, easily he can fill out to like, he's in the low 200s now, but like 230, 250. I mean, I'm not that much, but you can just basically, you can track it, right? When you watch him play at the high school level where he completely dominated, obviously, he it was pretty easy for him, but the parts that even when that he looks like he struggled with look like they're actually probably pretty correctable, especially when you take into account, I mean, the absolute energy the guy plays with too, like wanted to just completely crush people. I mean, and has some crazy highlights,
Yes.
right? Like some crazy highlights against guys who, are going to be not NBA players, but it's just so easy to see it. Like, it's so easy to see it translate. And it's just really, really exciting. We can get to like some more parts of his game, but that's been the thing since watching, like starting to tune into draft coverage and watching way more tape on these guys way earlier than we usually do. This Ace Bailey piece it just jumps off the page or jumps off the screen. I mean, within the first 1 second of you watching him, you can tell like he's way, way, way next level in so many parts of his game already.
No, which is really impressive. And obviously, if you're thinking about how it translates going to one thing you mentioned there just quickly, and we said this, I think, talking about Cooper Flagg too. It is when when you watch these highlights, I think because you can go deep into any draft class and watch players absolutely crushing it against, high schoolers and have to compartmentalize the idea that, well, okay, yes, they're playing at a very good high school, but then there's the finite percentage of guys that are going to go on to NBA or go on to college and then to the NBA. So you can't really look at it as sometimes you see there's a highlight of Ace Bailey. I'm going to put in the amazing bucket anyway. Someone is kind of, random player X is working the baseline on the offensive end, and Ace Bailey elevates to block him, but he doesn't block him. He goes up and just grabs the ball at the highest point and then brings it back down and goes the other way. Now, again, competition level you're playing against is one thing, but the other side of translatable skill set is, hey, this is a guy that has a lot of those natural instincts on both ends of the floor to be able to identify, rotate, shift over, pick up other assignments. Like, there's just a lot of elements to his game on that end of the floor that make a lot of sense before we even talk about what we think is expandable offensively.
Yeah, and like clearly wants to like play defense, right? It's sometimes it's a little hard to tell sometimes at different levels how much you're getting by on athleticism, how much you're getting by on just like sheer grit when it comes to defense. Did feel like watching tape on him that he was, dialed into wanting to at least be part of the defensive structure, and I think that's like also important too. And when you get a guy like him, because here's the thing that you can't create or the thing you can't train into someone is their size and athleticism. You can get people stronger and you can get people faster, but it's really hard to you can't make someone taller and longer, right? So like just starting from those, when you start someone with a 6'10" frame who has crazy, crazy generational athleticism, like you're already so far ahead of the game because those are the things you can't get anywhere else. You can dream on it from guys, and you sometimes see people overreach on just the measurables alone. But when when the size and frame is already translated to both ends of the court, even on a lower level, you just already know you're getting away with something as an NBA team, right? Like you're so far ahead of the game. You're so far ahead of the game because everyone else it just isn't going to come in with the same size and be able to take mid-range pull-ups, which he tries to do, right? Shoot the three, which he already tries to do. Absolutely annihilate people at the basket, which he definitely tries to do a lot. And when you're just bigger and more athletic and the other pieces are with it there also, it's just an absolute cheat code. The guy's like really a cheat code. Again, if it wasn't for Cooper Flagg, we probably wouldn't be having too many discussions about who the number one pick in the draft is, right? Like that's just where Ace Bailey is. So definitely some pieces of his game he needs to improve on. We'll talk about some of those in a second. We'll talk about sort of like what we're looking for with his season at Duke and more. Get into that here in a second. First, going to tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championship. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle, level it up to peak performance, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, so much more. Maybe you're into speed, maybe it's power, maybe it's style. eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll find exactly what you're looking for with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back with eBay Motors. You're burning rubber, not cash, with all the parts you need. The prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP. Bring home those huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers.
And obviously, as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, we'll also be talking about Maluach out of also Duke. So we've now gone through. We'll be within the top 10 here, and we'll talk about eventually, obviously, taking a look at other players inside of the top 10. We'll have another Rutgers product to keep our eye on there in Dylan Harper. We've already talked about Cooper Flagg. We'll have another guy at Duke. So condensing, we always say, when you talk about NBA prospects, one of the first schools you think about is Duke, and then one of the next immediate schools you go to is Rutgers University, a place that I want to tell you, behind the scenes, some people were not necessarily aware existed on the college landscape, but that's for the network to deal with, not for us. You mentioned about just on Ace Bailey in terms of his offensive end, which, by the way, his full name is Arias, which
Yep.
I don't know how you couldn't like the idea of the branding around that. The attacking at the basket for him was something that I really like too in those highlights you talk about. They are like jump off the screen kind of highlights. For a player of his size, and you think about him adding a little bit of weight, the body control that he has, leaving his feet, getting into the paint, and still showing incredible ability to bring that ball from his right lower hip up and under and around and finishing on the left side of the basket. Like, there's some really impressive traits in that regard, even though the highlight plays are the ones where he is attacking guys and trying to get above the rim as well.
Yeah, like I said, he's going to be a 3-level scorer almost for sure at the NBA level. And if you can do that, then you're just like, I mean, Kevin Durant, you are like Paul George, like you are these guys who can just do, can be so versatile. And if you know that you can already beat guys off the dribble and then attack the basket too to get downhill, which actually is funny about KD. I said KD, but maybe that's not even a great comp because KD didn't even do that great. He's generational, so it's not a dig against him, but he wasn't like an attack the basket guy. He was just such a sniper that he could just rise up and over you. If you start thinking that Ace Bailey might have the rise up and over plus another piece of it where he wants to get to the hoop kind of over and over again, then you're kind of comping him maybe to something else, right? to a slightly different player. And I think that that's what you're kind of looking for. You're looking at with him. You're looking at a guy who, it's funny about these, this new group of players that have come in the last probably, 10 years, let's say, where, and I kind of said it at the beginning, where they are these huge guys, 6'9", 6'10", 6'11", but they vision themselves as guards. Honestly, if you watch Wembanyama, it's like he visions himself as a guard. At times, right. He wants to play. He wants to put the ball through his legs. He wants to play around the perimeter. He wants to rise and fire over guys. Oh, he just happens to be, 9 feet tall. So that also helps when it comes to actually being able to do this stuff. But the way they've been brought up and the way that and I actually, Ace is more like this than even Cooper Flagg is that because Flagg, it's like, okay, he's going to be kind of a 3, 4, 5, 3, really pushing it especially in terms of ball handling. I mean, Ace Bailey could be like a 2 with the way he plays. Like he could honestly he could translate to be a shooting guard, and that's probably overreaching a little bit, but it's maddening or crazy to think that you're even saying that about a guy his size because of the way he plays. And I think that that's the really exciting piece of a guy like him is that, you want him to be you want him to play the 2. Yeah, again, because that's how well he can, secondary play make or even, initially play make. He's got good court vision. This is the new version of the NBA that we're talking about when we're thinking about a 6'10" guy playing like a guard and doing it just fine. It's like I said at the beginning, it's just such a cheat code if you have a guy like this on your team.
It's interesting that you mentioned about like Kevin Durant and not falling into the category. Imagine knocking Kevin Durant for being too good at the ability to just pull up over anybody anywhere that he wants on the court.
It just didn't need to go to the basket.
That's what I mean. No, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But it's such to be that good at that you're like, I don't even need to probably be amazing at these other aspects of the game if I choose to, if I go to do it. And we've seen some of those instances over his career anyway, but to be that elite at it. And to your point on Ace Bailey, there's always a bad thing to start to do. Oh, well, who would you prefer, for the Brooklyn Nets next season? You take any of these guys, they're all looks like they're going to work out really well, especially these top 2 players. But when you talk about positional value, if you're going to tell me that, like, I have an opportunity in Ace Bailey to plug a player that can sit in the backcourt alongside Cam Thomas or whoever, and that can still afford guys like Noah Clowney, who you believe is going to develop this upcoming season, or currently having Nicholas Claxton, when you talk about fitting them in and, putting these pieces into place together, it is that part of it. To have players coming out with the mentality of that size and that athleticism, and then still be working and still coming in with a baseline ball handling skill, that's a different level for how you can construct your roster. And we always talk about what have the Nets lacked since Kevin Durant, since that brief superstar run. It's having kind of this positional versatility where you can line up your rotations in different ways and still be incredibly effective. So that's something I think Ace Bailey 100% has in his bag right now, especially if you think about, as you mentioned at the top, put on 15, 20 pounds, maybe a little bit more. Now all of a sudden you're playing with a little more size, a little more meat getting into the defense when you need to, switching up to more difficult matchups on the effort end for the defense, and also being able to attack more aggressively on the offensive end with that size and length. There's a lot of things to like footprints here to get excited about what Ace Bailey translates to.
The other thing you need in the NBA, the thing you desperately want, and every team wants this, is a system independent player, right? Like you want a guy who would just and personnel independent player.
Yeah.
Like it literally doesn't matter who the other four guys are. List any other four guys. Can you put this guy with those four guys? And the answer is yes. Like when you can say yes to the other four guys in basically any situation, then this is where you start talking talent in generations and not just, single seasons. We went into last year's draft class as a proxy. You couldn't really say that about a ton of guys. It's like, and this reason some guys didn't get high enough, like Reed Shepherd. Reed Shepherd's awesome. He's so good. It's like, can you play Reed Shepherd in any combination? No, because if you have another small guard, then you're really, really screwed, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing with guys like Sarr. It's like, is he play with everyone? No, because I have another huge. I mean, he's maybe a little different but if the shooting doesn't come around, it's like, can I play him with another big? It's like, no, right? Because now you're gonna lack other elements of the game. These guys like Cooper Flagg, these guys like Ace Bailey, it just doesn't matter. List the other four guys and use any four guys in the NBA. Are they going to fit with them? Yeah. And even in this draft class, which is really great. I mean, even honestly, when you get to like Dylan Harper and Noah Troy, like these guys, you're not gonna be able to say that as much about. They're still great and they're still awesome, but are they plug and play with literally any system? Like honestly, actually go back 2 drafts ago when the Blazers draft Scoot. It's like, okay, they draft Scoot. Is he gonna be able to play with Lillard? No. Okay, so you already can't play with the best guy.
Instant
like you already
problem.
Can't play.
Yeah, and when you can't play with the best guy on the team, that's a not identifies a problem, but like, hey, that's going to be an issue if our best player,
by the way. It's okay. They knew they were going to move on from Dame, so it's fine. It's a fine draft pick, but you already have him play. You have him come in day one. You're like, how are you going to play with these guys? I don't know. It's not going to work. Whereas like Brandon Miller, like it's like, okay, can he play with LaMelo? Yeah, could he play with Dean? Yeah, he can play with all these other guys because it's like it's so much more wing versatile. So I guess that's just my overall point is the dream is to have these guys where it's like it doesn't matter who we draft after. It doesn't matter who we bring in after. We're never gonna have to make a tough decision around the rest of the personnel because these guys just fit in any scheme and we'll just design stuff that just accentuates their abilities already.
Yeah, and that's a big part of being able to say we don't know how the board's going to unfold year over year. We don't know what players are going to become available. So even if you think about the Brooklyn Nets down the road and having the ability to hit draft picks spike draft picks now and then pursue free agents later, well, you could be talking about wanting to have the base that no matter what superstar we go and grab, who is always usually scheme independent, but you want him to drop in and have all the pieces fit around him. Coming up here in a second, let's talk about another top 10 prospect here who only started playing basketball at 13, 14 years old. Does Khaman Maluach have the upside that would be worthy of a top 10 draft pick for the Brooklyn Nets? We'll get into that coming up here in just one moment. All right, as we roll on today's Locked On Nets episode, we, of course, give you a little reminder that you're making Locked On Nets your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NBA. There is no off-season, as you know, for the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides you daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed or entertained as Locked On NBA, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, and it's every single day. One last note here on Ace Bailey and just on that idea of versatility in prospects and why you can start to categorize a little bit differently. Go look at the Brooklyn Nets, craftednba.com. Nick Claxton, not breaking any news here. He has a 14% versatility rate in terms of how he can be utilized. Yeah. Now, he has some really good skill sets, but it also restricts you. I mean, we've seen this play out in real time when you're trying to reclimate a Ben Simmons and you go, oh, well, we have 2 guys that can't be on the court together. That's an issue. Meanwhile, last year, small sample size, Noah Clowney, He comes in right now grading on Crafted NBA, 84% in his versatility. And we've already seen small sample of how that player can be that. So we already got it as Nets fans. You already watched how a player with a little more versatility opens up better opportunities on how you want to form your rotations, how you want to make your roster look going forward. So that's the good reminder when we look at any of these prospects and how they're going to fit. That being the case, how about an international player? How about Khaman Maluach, who I mentioned there at the break, only started playing basketball as a teenager, which is I always say I get into the best phases of my life. I find out that I'm incredibly athletic or talented in a certain area after a few years. I skip over some of the rec league things. Incredible looking raw player, let's put it that way. But this now falls into the category, I think, of different type of prospect. If you're falling to this point in the lottery, you are looking at a player like Maluach differently than a lot of the guys ahead of him in terms of upside, yes, but no guarantees of what he could develop into.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is why, he's listed in Tankathon and certain other places in the mock drafts at around 7. I think there's a pretty wide range of outcomes for what's going to happen to him after this year. He's going to Duke. He's going to play with Cooper Flagg. They have an absolutely crazy, huge back line here because Flagg's essentially playing the 3 on Duke, which is nuts. I watch out of the Sudan is 7-2. Did get some run with the Sudanese national team through FIBA. There is some tape on him against some of these other NBA guys like AD and Embiid in tune-up games. You mentioned raw. It's very raw. Like, he is of that very, very thin but huge kind of frame that you can kind of picture that's come out of some of these areas at times, right? Like the Bull for kind of frame, guys like this, where it's like it's super skinny. And actually, this is why I mentioned at the beginning with Ace Bailey. It's like, can you picture Ace Bailey and that body sort of filling out a little bit at the NBA level? Yeah. Can you with Maluach as much? Not really. Right. It's a little harder. It's a little harder to see how that's going to go, like full bulk up to be able to handle
not as broad across the shoulders, which is usually the indicator.
He's super, super skinny. He's super skinny. But he's 7'2". He's hyper athletic. The fact that he doesn't have a million NBA reps and still looks pretty comfortable in terms of just like rotations, weak side shot blocking, just being
dribble
able to
stuff look good. Like there's some nice things. Yeah.
Able to do some of these little pieces already. So I think there's probably a ceiling because of where like just the overall basketball skill ends up getting. But as we get lower in the draft, like he's a guy, let me put it this way. Right now he's 7. I do not see him climbing higher than set. Like I don't see him shooting up the draft boards this year. But I could be wrong about that. But would he end up being like, is he a guy that could fall a little bit and you would want to take a flyer on because of just the overall size and frame and just like overall raw ability? Yeah, for sure. So I don't in my initial look at him, I don't see like he would have to really pop at Duke to really climb to the draft boards. And I'm not sure like he's the kind of player at the NCAA level that will pop just because of how the college basketball systems run.
Right. So is he going to have a lot of opportunity to move that needle?
And just because, they're just not going to maybe run some of the stuff that's going to like really bring out his talents. Will be a very interesting guy to watch. And just pairing him with a guy like Flagg, honestly, I'd be like, how is anyone going to score? I mean, these guys, it's like me playing against my kid in basketball. These guys are so huge. It's really going to be something to watch.
And I mean, so when we looked at, we talked about Cooper Flagg on our last episode, we also talked about Hugo Gonzalez. And when we looked at Hugo Gonzalez, we think about him in a different way than we're talking about right now. Maluach, who's right behind him on Tankathon, right? 6 and 7. But I think that there's a difference there between those two prospects. And as we move forward, talking about Dylan Harper, maybe talking about Trey Johnson, we're going to pick out some of these other guys, Liam McNeely. I think a lot of it's going to come down to that. It's what prospects over the course of this upcoming season can maybe build on what the perception is of them right now, and potentially Maluach kind of just maybe takes a couple slots down here. And I wonder, outside of lottery or not, I think that depends on how the middle of the pack here kind of goes, but it will be interesting to see. And it's part of that I find unfortunate. You mentioned some of these other players at the NBA level that have had these kind of frames, because I wonder what the best path is for guys like this. Like, I almost wonder if they'd be better suited doing the extra 2 years of college, right? Coming out maybe a little bit older, which is always a downside people look at from a prospect standpoint. But it's a give and take because, as you mentioned, you just may not get the quality reps at that position at the college level because that's not how they're playing the game. So should you be going into some of the other leagues that are available before you get to the NBA to maybe refine yourself, mostly just to spike a better draft position, by the way? Like, this isn't really about how your game can develop, but maybe you're better suited taking the extra couple of years to refine.
It's interesting about that. So I will say, for a guy like him who's super raw and has not been playing basketball for a long time, the college route probably is the way to go, not from a schematic approach, but from a fundamentals approach, right? Because if you
get the tenants down,
if you are like still very raw new to the game and still need to be hammering on the basics, what we would think to be the basics, or like, it's beyond the basics of just your regular leagues, but like the actual basics that you're going to need to push up to the next levels, then college basketball on that sense is a better place to go. It's a good environment. It's built all around skill development, right? The systems are kind of slow and plodding because they're mostly just built around sort of like skill based rather than like schematic based. And so then you get there and you're just in a regiment of skill upgrades. And not everyone needs that, right? And like there's some guys who college systems hold them back. Frankly, when you're like hyper athletic, like Ace Bailey, is the college system the best system for him? Probably not, right? Like he could being able to play against just like bigger guys where he can get into like some more scheme stuff, like that would actually probably help him maybe more. I don't know. That's a little off the cuff. But with a guy like this, where basketball is relatively new, getting into Duke, into an awesome environment about just learning basketball, it probably is actually the best place. So I think your question was correct. And I think it is, and I'm mostly just kind of thinking this as I go, but it seems to me that like, hey, do you need to still learn some stuff that these other guys have been doing for years?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, college might not be the worst place to be super dedicated to that.
Yeah, no, to be able to work on function over form. And by the way, maybe it's the kind of thing where you look at the box scores for him, as you were mentioning before, it's not going to be so flashy going through the college season. But if you think that he's developing those other areas that can help him at the NBA level, then worthwhile. So that being the case, though, we've now covered 4 out of the top 10 players here in the upcoming draft right now. Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey. We also took a look at Gonzalez and now Maluach. We're going to obviously be looking at Dylan Harper next. We haven't officially decided. We've just been basically going in order as far as Tankathon, taking that break and still looking inside the top end of this draft. So it could be Trey Johnson. Doug and I will decide who we're going to look at there for the comp, but we still have between now and the start of the season, because of how much talent there is in this draft. We also still have to dive back into the back end of the first round as a programming note and talk about guys in the 20s in the back end of this roster, because there are a handful of names that certainly, at least right now, with 3 picks back there, the Brooklyn Nets are also going to be looking out to fill their roster after they add, we assume, an elite star at the top of the draft. So a lot of fun stuff.
It's going to be hilarious. Next year, next summer, we're just going to be talking. They're going to just do a full roster turnover again. Like the team next year will look 100% different than it does this year. And it's just I mean, this is what happens with bad teams. So I all for it, but it's just so funny how this is going to work.
And by the way, there's also a player we may cover who has a Cam Thomas comp at the NBA level. And it makes me think about an interesting question for next offseason as well. Something we'll discuss at some point this offseason. So you got to stay tuned. That's the deal. Doug will tell you.
All right, look, we're doing draft coverage a year ahead of time. That's where the Nets season is going, folks. That's okay. Nets aren't going to hold up their end of the bargain with winning this year, but that's fine. We're all here for it. We're going to cover you 5 days a week, all through the offseason, into the season, all through the season as well. Make sure you tuned into Locked On Nets wherever you listen to the podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe over on YouTube also, where we continue to see those numbers climb. Free for you to help the show, and that's the number one way for us. Like and subscribe wherever you listen.
If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Why, that is Marcus Aurelius.
Oh, my goodness. One of the all-time great poets. R.I.P., by the way.
Yeah, he didn't make it. Yeah.
Gone too soon.
We were pulling for him.
Yeah. Yeah, gone too soon.
He couldn't.
One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.